What up, Wizards? It's Dev from The Place, and I got some previews for you today. Already, you might ask? What set, Dev? Well, it's kind of like all of the sets, actually. Wizards decided that they were just going to give us a little bit of everything from just about every set that's left to come out in 2024. And honestly, that's just about all the introduction I need or want to do for this one. I don't want to waste any more of your time. You're here to see new cards, so let's go ahead and start with the next standard release, Outlaws at Thunder Junction. Let's take a look first at Hell to Pay and Fibblethip Lost on the Range. Now, Hell to Pay is X and a red for a sorcery. It deals X damage to target creature. Create a number of tapped treasure tokens equal to the amount of excess damage dealt to the creature this way. Now, I have a critique here. Yes, a removal spell that rams you, that looks really, really tempting, but let's just say that you want to take out a 2 toughness creature and also get 2 treasure tokens out of the deal. That'll be 5 mana, sir, madam, pay up. That's kind of an awful lot. Trying to stay positive, though. You know, we'd like to do that around here. I think there's an argument for this card where, like, on turn 3, you pick off a 1 toughness dude and you leave a treasure behind. And look at that. You affected the board state and you bank some mana for next turn. You're feeling pretty good about that despite the sorcery speed. And obviously, late in the game off the top of your library, maybe you draw it. It takes out a 3 toughness guy, 4 toughness guy, leaves behind a treasure or 2. And you're feeling okay about drawing this card off the top of your library. So there are some good spots for it. Maybe it goes in the World Souls Rage deck, so you can take out creatures and then ramp for bigger World Souls Rages. I'm not too sure about it, but I do like X spells, so I at least have to give it some due diligence here. I think it's a cool card. I'm moving on to Fibblethip Lost on the Range. I should go ahead and let you know we have incomplete information about this card, but he still looks neat. He's 3 mana, 1 and 2 blue for a 1/1 legendary homunculus with Ward 2. You may look at the top card of your library anytime you want to. The top card of your library has Plot. The plot cost is equal to its mana cost. You may plot non-land cards from the top of your library. I think it's something about putting cards in exile, right? You pay the mana cost and it puts them in exile and you can cast them from there for free or reduced cost or something like that. Something like that is going on here. Plot is you plan on playing the card later so it goes into exile or something. That's my call, but either way, this guy's either like really very good or not good at all, or okay, just kind of what I'm betting on, to be honest. If this is just kind of a form of card advantage a la Augur of Autumn or some similar cards like that you usually see in green, Courser of Krufix, blah, blah, blah. You know, if it's one of these, then it's probably at least like a decently playable commander card, if nothing else. But I'm not sure that it sees play in standard almost no matter what. But this is an interesting little piece of card advantage. Because that's what it is, right? It's card advantage. No matter what plot actually is, it's just a form of card advantage, I am sure. So actually, card looks kind of cool, but, you know, we don't know enough about it yet. So let's move on to a card where we know all the stuff it does. This is Oko, the Ringleader, 4 mana. Watch out. It's an Oko. This is 2, a green and a blue for a 3 loyalty Oko Planeswalker. The passive text on this is, at the beginning of combat on your turn, Oko the Ringleader becomes a copy of up to 1 target creature you control until end of turn, except he has hexproof. Now, the +1, you draw 2 cards, and then if you've committed a crime this turn, you discard a card. Otherwise, discard 2 cards. I thought that we knew everything this card did. I forgot that it had the committed a crime text on it. More on that in a second. But for -1, you get the Elk. You get 3/3 Elk if you -1 Oko. And then for -5, for each other non-land permanent you control, create a token that is a copy of that permanent. And that's only -5. It's actually kind of a good and attainable ultimate, if you ask me. But what about all this other stuff here? What's this about? I think committing a crime is just going to be like casting a spell or something. I really honestly kind of think it's going to be as simple as that. It might be a little more advanced than just cast an instant or sorcery, right? It's got to be. It would be really confusing. It was just like, well, if you cast an instant or sorcery, you've committed a crime. We'll see. But we'll get to why I think that when we get to some other cards in just a second. But either way, Oko just kind of looks normal to me. You know, the plus, being able to draw 2 cards, like even if you do have to discard 2 cards right after that, is actually still kind of sick. This also just gives you a steady stream of Elks, which I guess is fine. But for 4 mana, honestly, and at 3 starting loyalty, it looks like they definitely tried to make an Oko that wasn't ridiculously broken this time around. And they've come right around to one that might be a little mediocre, but who am I to say? Maybe this is way better than I think it is. Oh, but it's a beautiful day. The sun is shining, birds are chirping, and on days like this, kids like you should be reading Tiny Bones. The pickpocket. Do you get my Undertale joke? I'm old. I'm older than all you guys, and I've played Undertale, so you have no excuse. It's very good. Either way, Tiny Bones the pickpocket is a pretty unbelievable magic card, actually. So, 1/1 legendary skeleton rogue with Death Touch. Whenever Tiny Bones deals combat damage to a player, you may cast target non-land permanent card from that player's graveyard, and mana of any type can be spent to cast that spell. Yikes. It's a pretty good card, man. One thing I'll say is that like decks like Boros Convoke and a lot of other Magic decks right now are playing tons of 1-drops that like Warden of the Inner Sky and Novice Inspector and yada yada that can just block this guy and like lose their creature and they don't really care. Okay. Voldaire and Epicure, like sure I'll lose that, I don't care. So there's plenty of ways to block this dude right now, like in the relatively early game, even if there is like an Inspector or an Evolved Sleeper or a Skrell or like something that you can get for just 1 mana out of their yard. You can bet they're probably going to have something to block this with that's fairly inconsequential. So, any 2/2 brick walls at Wandering Emperor token, you done, kids. So with that in mind, though, I will point out there's various ways in Standard to make this like unblockable or semi-unblockable, right? Like Delny is a cool thing because not only will it make it a lot harder to block, but in that case, it'll also trigger twice if you have a Delny out. So that's kind of backbreaking if you have enough mana to support it. You could also somehow get a Cryptic Coat on it if it's on top of your library and you cast a Cryptic Coat and you cloak your Tiny Bones. Well, now your Tiny Bones is unblockable and it's only going to cost 1 mana to flip him up. So you get like a guaranteed activation at least once, and he's still got the coat on him, right? When he's flipped up, so he's going to be unblockable like every turn. That seems fun. I guess if you want to bring up Soul Cauldron again in this fit, why not? You could play this in Soul Cauldron. Sort of. But you're not going to be playing this in just like the everyday Soul Cauldron deck that tries to like infinite combo the opponent. No. Instead, you're going to be playing Soul Cauldron and Tiny Bones along with Ginger Brute and Surge Engine, right? Because then if you got a Ginger Brute or a Surge Engine in your yard, then you can exile with the Soul Cauldron and make your Tiny Bones unblockable and just start casting permanents for the rest of the game out of your opponent's graveyard. So there's some pretty fun little like combos or synergies with Tiny Bones in Standard. But honestly, just like a 1 mana 1/1 Death Touch, and he's a skeleton too? You're talking about a 1-drop skeleton? Okay. There's a lot of things I like about this dude, pretty obviously. This is one of my favorite cards all day. Let's look at some crimes, everybody. Who likes doing crimes? Jeez, we got murders in the last set and crimes. Wizards is on one this year, man. We're going to get the haunted house set too this year. Like, there's some weird stuff going on over there in-house. They're cooking up something. But either way, let's look at some crimes. These are going to be cards that appear in every how knows how many packs. You know, it's basically a bonus sheet for this set. And they're going to be like wanted postery. I know that the last card we looked at, Tiny Bones and Oko, they had wanted poster versions. These are the breaking news cards. And they're going to be like older spells from Magic history. We can get anything from split spells like Crime and Punishment, which are fine. These are fine spells to have in packs. It's going to be fun to play in Limited and blah, blah, blah. But you could also just get a Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize on the bonus sheet for this. That's kind of hype a little bit. To be honest, I don't love the breaking news one, but I do like the normal, quote unquote, normal one with the weird Wild West typeset and all that in the title box and the type line box. There's just something I do like about the art and blah, blah. But either way, you should know that there's old spells in the set and sometimes they're Thoughtseize. But there's 2 more cards from Outlaws at Thunder Junction that we got to see today. And we saved the best for last on this one, man. I'm fairly certain that the story with these cards is that they were cards that were supposed to be in the epilogue set to Outlaws. But you remember March of the Machine Aftermath? Do you not remember that? There's a reason for that. And if you do remember it, you probably don't do so fondly. It was the small set that came out after March of the Machine that had like 50 cards in it. And it was a stinker. They had that planned for this one too and decided to scrap it because everybody hated the idea so much last time. So instead, they have slipped these cards from Epilogue into the set, Outlaws at Thunder Junction. And apparently these will occur at some rate or another in normal packs. And they're pretty powerful cards. Let me actually show them to you. We got Nexus of Becoming and Sword of Wealth and Power today. Now, Nexus of Becoming is 6 mana for an artifact. At the beginning of combat on your turn, draw a card. Then you may exile an artifact or creature card from your hand. If you do, Create a token that's a copy of the exiled card, except it's a 3/3 Golem artifact creature in addition to its other types. So yeah, is this a commander card? Well, first of all, I think if you get it set up in standard, probably do some stuff. So if you're playing the right kind of deck and you're ramping, you're playing big score and dropping stuff in your yard and also ramping into this, like I think there's maybe an argument for at least trying the card out. But yeah, ultimately it looks like more of a commander card. And if it does nothing else, at least it draws you an extra card every single turn. But occasionally it's going to let you convert a giant monster in your hand into some sort of enter the battlefield value or something like that. You know, the creature's always going to come down as a 3/3, but there are going to be times where you get a sweet ETB trigger for basically free. You know, so just a ridiculous card once it's on the table, but that's what makes me kind of think it's a commander card. But that said, I don't know how many times we have to see 7 mana cards in standard before we're like, maybe they're not all commander cards. Let's look at Sword of Wealth and Power. A lot of people calling this the best sword ever printed. I don't think it is. I'm just going to come right out and say it. This is 3 mana for an equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from instants and from sorceries. Whenever a equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. When you next cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. And after all that, it equips for just 2 mana. So yeah, it does feel like one of the original swords. The only problem is it still procs on combat damage, but does not in any way help you get through for combat damage. And that just really bugs me. I'm not like super convinced about the card, but for the last time, I will acknowledge it is powerful. So that was all of Outlaws for now. It's actually far fewer Outlaws at Thunder Junction than I thought we'd see today. I figured we'd get 15, 20 cards. They'd mostly focus on that. And even though we did get a fair amount of stuff to look at and look forward to, and some interesting templating changes. I don't know if you noticed, but they actually gendered Oko instead of saying it's in the text box, which is something that apparently is going to continue moving forward. I like it. I like that change. It helps characterize the Magic cards, right? It helps actually establish a connection. This is a person. It's a he. It's a she, right? Instead of just like, it's casting cost. It does the thing if it does the thing. You know, I kind of like that very slight change. And we'll see another sort of syntax change once we get to Bloomburrow that I think matters. But for now, let's jump into Modern Horizons 3 because like, there's a lot of ridiculous stuff in this thing. So let's take a look. As usual, we start with the cards I may not have been as impressed by, but are still kind of neat. You know, we got Scurry of Gremlins as well as Layla. It's actually Lalia. That's right. The Blade Reforged. Now Scurry is 4 mana, 2 a red and a white for an enchantment. When it ETBs, create 2 1/1 red gremlin creature tokens. Then you get an amount of energy equal to the number of creatures you control. You can also pay 4 energy to have creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain haste until end of turn. So energy returns in Modern Horizons 3. I think it's cool. I think energy is like a fine mechanic. I never really had too much of a problem with it. I think it's cool to have another resource to spend. Now, this is automatically going to give you 2 dudes and 2 energy. And then the ability to just go absolutely ham later on in the game, especially if you're making a buttload of tokens all in one turn. You know, giving them +1/+0 and haste is going to end 1 or 2 or 3 other players' games that night. So this could actually be like really, really good, or it could just be normal. I'm going to bet on normal, but there's definitely ways to do stuff with it. But let's look at Lalia, the Blade Reforged. 3 mana, 2 and a red for a 2/2 legendary spirit warrior with haste. It's not as bad as it sounds. Whenever it attacks, you exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. Whenever 1 or more cards are put into exile from your library and or your graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on Lalia. That's sick, actually. There are a ton of ways, especially in red, just to get cards exiled off of the top of your library, right? You got Ren's Resolve and all the other ones. There's like a million. There's a card in standard that's exactly like Ren's Resolve. It's a functional reprint, but either way, there's a ton of these. And as a matter of fact, we just saw one in the Fallout set that makes you skip your draw steps. A 3-mana enchantment, skip your draw step every turn, do this twice. You know, exile the top 2 cards of your library, you can play them that turn. So that's 2 +1/+1 counters for this lady every single turn on that one card, which I think is really cool. But obviously, there's a bunch of ways to get cards exiled from your graveyard too. And sometimes you don't even have to be the one to do that. Your opponents do that for you, right? So it's actually a cool little last line of text on this. And it's just, depending on what you've got set up, this could get huge the turn you play it. Like, go ahead and swing in. But It's actually neat. It gives you card advantage. It fuels itself, makes itself bigger. Presumably the first time it attacks, it's going to be at least a 3/3 and technically draw you a card. Card actually looks really, really cool. I'm not sure that it's like modern playable or anything, but I think it's a fun little cubable and definitely commander card. And if anything, it's a commander itself. I want to play with this thing. Let's move on here and take a look at one of my favorite cards of the whole day, no matter what set we're talking about. It's Psychic Frog, baby. But we also got a really good name for a Magic card. You ready for this? We got to see It That Heralds the End today. But we're going to start with Psychic Frog, man. This is a black and a blue for a 1/2 frog. And when it deals combat damage to a player or a planeswalker, you draw a card. You can also discard a card to put a +1/+1 counter on Psychic Frog. And if you exile 3 cards from your yard, Psychic Frog gains flying until end of turn. So it's like a wild mongrel Necrotog Ophidian. They just like threw all of the old creatures for blue and black together in one thing. I guess not wild mongrel, but that wasn't like Green Black Madness for a long time, Simic Madness for a long time. It's an honorary member of the crew, but either way, it's just a bunch of old creatures just thrown together and they made it a frog with awesome art. So, favorite card of the day. I shouldn't even have to explain myself too much more. This card actually is really sweet. I'm pretty sure actually that if I order like any card from today, it'll probably be this one. Likely because it's going to end up being like 25 cents before it's all said and done, but that is a great price to get in my cube. So let's move on, though, to It That Heralds the End. This is 1 mana and a colorless mana. So 2 mana. For a 2/2 Eldrazi drone, there's a lot of Eldrazi stuff in Modern Horizons 3. Colorless spells you cast with mana value 7 or greater cost 1 less to cast. Other colorless creatures you control get +1/+1. So artifact creatures that like most artifact creatures get +1/+1. That's kind of nice, I guess. But I do like this sort of ramp mode as well. You know, all your 7 drops cost 6 now. That's what a ramper, you know. I guess it is worth a lot though, because it's a lot harder to get to 6 mana or to 7 mana than 6 mana in most cases. So you'll be pretty happy you have this dude. But there's just 3 more cards from MH3. Let's take a look next at Ajani Nakatl Pariah. Pretty sure this is before he was completed, just if anybody has that question. This is 2 mana, 1 and a white for a 1/2 legendary cat warrior. When he ETBs, create a 2/1 white cat warrior creature token. Whenever 1 or more other cats you control die, you may exile Ajani, return him to the battlefield transformed under his owner's control. He becomes Ajani Nakatl Avenger. I was going to say Adventurer. This is a 3 loyalty planeswalker. You can +2 it to put a +1/+1 counter on each cat you control, baby. You can also 0 this thing to get a 2/1 white warrior creature, cat warrior creature token. And when you do, if you control a red permanent other than Ajani, he deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control to any target. Also, -4. Each opponent chooses an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, and a planeswalker from among the non-land permanents they control, and then they sacrifice the rest. It's actually kind of easy to get to this ultimate when you consider, too, that like if you +2 him, he can ultimate and stick around, which is kind of nasty, but he's just making cats for you. He's blowing stuff up. I think it's really relevant that this is a 2 mana card that eventually turns into a planeswalker. That's good enough, but also this thing has a 0, not a minus, a 0 that puts a creature into play and is a removal spell at the same time. I'm talking about real, actual, competitive, modern play for this dude is 100% possible. He's just like really, really low cost and ends up doing everything before it's all said and done. He's a wrath effect, check. He's, he makes your dudes bigger, check. He puts dudes on the table, check. Removal spell, check. He puts 2 guys in the table when you first cast him, check. 2 mana for that? Like, it's kind of repulsive when you think about it, but obviously he's also a cat. And he makes cats, and he cares about cats. So he's the best Magic card that was ever printed, at least in my eyes. But let's move on to Flare of Cultivation, because this card's kind of busted looking a little bit. It's 3 mana, 1 and 2 green for a sorcery. You may sacrifice a non-token green creature rather than pay the spell's mana cost. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal those cards, put 1 onto the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand, and then shuffle. So yeah, it's a free Cultivate. It's a free Kodama's Reach. All you got to do is Elvish Mystic on turn 1. And then on turn 2, you make sure you tap your Elvish Mystic to get some mana before it dies. And then you just sack him. And you get to ramp on turn 2. And also make sure you get a guaranteed land drop the next turn. And also you have a green mana floating from the elf you sacrifice. And that's just assuming that it's an elvish mystic. It could be like anything. It could even be a boat, you know, like there's a lot of options that you have for a turn 1 green creature. And by the way, you don't have to wait till turn 2. You can just like play a turn 1 green creature and then go ahead and get your ramp on turn 1 that way, which is also pretty nasty, man. Like, I know you're coming down like on board presence. You're technically like, you're not even 2 for 1ing yourself. You're getting 2 lands. You're spending 2 cards. You're not even 2 for 1ing yourself. I was trying to make a point against the card, but you're not even doing that. So the card is actually just kind of disgusting. It has to be a non-token green, dude, but that is easily solvable by green 1-drop, you know? And also note that like in decks that want you to sacrifice creatures or put creatures in the graveyard or have some sort of dies triggers on their guys, like this card's going to be really good there too. It's just really, really disgusting and commander of nothing else. But I got a feeling that this card is more than modern playable. I got a feeling this card is legacy playable. We'll move on to the last card from MH3 here. I had to save Emmy for last. It's Emrakul, The World Anew. This is 12 mana for a 12/12 legendary Eldrazi. Whenever you cast this spell, gain control of all creatures target player controls. Emmy herself has flying, protection from spells, and from permanents that were cast this turn. Okay. When Emrakul the World Anew leaves the battlefield, sack all creatures you control. Sack them all. This also has Madness, pay 6 colorless mana. So if you can scrounge up 6 colorless mana and somehow discard this, then you get you get this for a really good deal. Like an unbelievably good deal you get this for. 6 colorless is really good. That's so good, man. It's holy butts. Like that's Tronable too. Like God, that could actually be a problem. Gain control of all the creatures they control, and then you can never remove it. You know, I guess you can cast a sweeper and that'll do it, but protection from spells. It also has protection from enter the battlefield triggers, which is what that actually says, in case you were wondering. So yeah, card is just like slightly busted, as you know, a 12/12 for 6 mana. That's probably not actually that hard to get into play in the first place, and then it just snatches all your opponent's creatures, and you probably win the game that turn if you have anything to attack with. What a card. What a card. This, you know, I keep thinking that free ramp thing is probably the best card of the day, no matter what the set in terms of competitive play. But like, the more I look at this card, the more I'm like, you're going to come down on turn 5 all the time, aren't you? Like, this is probably one to look out for. But hey, are you ready? Not for Bloomburrow. I'm actually going to take a quick jump into a haystack here and talk about references. I'm going to talk about these Assassin's Creed cards from today. Look, I played the first Assassin's Creed, and I'm familiar with the names of some of the characters because I carried a Game Informer subscription for longer than most people, so I'd read the reviews and be like, oh, that's that guy's name. Okay, but I never played the games. So I haven't played a lot of Assassin's Creed. That said, some of these cards do look cool, and like I've said like a million times, it's basically slogan of the channel at this point, except for your favorite channel's Magic Channel's favorite Magic Channel. The other slogan for the channel is that all I really care about is cool cards. Is it cool? It's awesome. Let's play it. Let's look at it. So with that in mind, let's take a quick breeze through these Assassin's Creed cards. Now, first of all, we got to see a couple of different versions of Ezio, and they both look pretty cool. Where's his online shop? It's on Etsy, yo. First of all, there's Ezio Auditore da Firenze. This is 2 mana, 1 and a black for a 3/2 legendary human assassin with menace. Assassin spells you cast have free running 2 black. What the heck is that? First of all, you may cast a spell for its free running cost if you dealt combat damage to a player this turn with an assassin or commander. Okay. When Ezio deals combat damage to a player, you may pay Wooburg if that player has 10 or less life. When you do, the player loses the game. No big deal. Just a 5-color commander. If I happen to smack you while you're at 10 or less life, that's just the end of your night. That's kind of neat. It's just it's neat. And it works obviously in Assassin's decks. It's a cheap commander too. There's kind of nothing to hate about this. Now, the other Ezio is also good in your Assassin decks and commander. This is 5 mana for Blade of Vengeance, 3 a blue and a black for a 5/5. That's a big guy. For a 5/5 legendary human assassin with Death Touch. Whenever an assassin you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Simple, clean, great line of text for your Assassin's decks and Commander. You're going to play it till the end of time. How you feel about that? Did you know the Assassin's Creed set's going to be legal in Modern? How you feel about that? I think that's what's important here. But let's take a look next at Altair Ibn Lahad. This is Mardu colors, so you know I like it. A red, a white, and a black for a 3/3 legendary human assassin with first strike. When it attacks, exile up to one target assassin creature card from your yard with a memory counter on it. Then for each creature card you own in exile with a memory counter on it, create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of it. Exile the tokens at the end of combat. That's actually kind of neat. Just more assassin, support, I guess, which is always good. I've always liked assassins as a creature type, so actually kind of neat that you just get free token copies of any assassins that happen to be in your graveyard when this guy attacks. So not terrible, but also not that amazing. Even in Commander, I gotta say, cards have to be really good to be good nowadays. And even though this is cool and you can do stuff with it, I will say it works really well with Ishin. It works super well with Ishin because it triggers twice. So there's some tech for you. We also saw a couple of fun artifacts today, like Animus and Haystack. It wasn't just a random reference to nothing. There's actually a Haystack card, but the Animus is 2 mana for a legendary artifact. At the beginning of your end step, exile up to one target legendary card from a graveyard with a memory counter on it. That was a graveyard, not just yours. You can tap it. Until your next turn, target legendary creature you control becomes a copy of target creature card in exile with a memory counter on it. Activate only as a sorcery. So I'm going to poo-poo a little bit on the sorcery thing, but I do like the flavor here, Pretty sure if I remember this game that I played 12, 14 years ago at this point, something like that, like the present guy from the family that Ezio's in gets in the Animus, and then he can see and control and kind of be and experience Ezio. So I see the flavor they're trying to go with here, and I do kind of like it. If anything, I love that it says a graveyard on it, which is kind of gross. And even though you have to have legendary dudes out to facilitate this, obviously you're just turning your commander into whatever other commander is on the table or in a graveyard or whatever legendary creature you happen to be able to scrounge up. So there's a lot of fun stuff you can do with this, and any deck can play it, which I think is great. But Haystack is 2 mana, 1 and a white for an artifact. Get this, you pay 2 and you tap the Haystack to have target creature you control phase out. That is incredible flavor. Good job. They did a really good job with this card's flavor. And to be honest, the card ain't really half bad either, especially again in Commander, where phasing out is going to keep all of the auras and stuff that you have on the creature. It's not necessarily like blinking. You're not going to get those ETB triggers again, but it does keep your creature safe for a couple of turns. And there's a bunch of reasons you might want to do that. Let's take a look next at the silliest cards of the day. It is super silly that both of these cards exist because somehow in Magic the Gathering now, by way of the Assassin's Creed set, we have cards for Cleopatra and Leonardo da Vinci, who are people who lived in history. I guess it's like an alternate timeline of some kind. Still, it's very weird to have a Cleopatra card, but here we made it. We made it here, I guess. Celebrate or not, I don't know. But Cleopatra's 4 mana, 2 in Golgari colors for a 2/4 legendary human noble. It has allies. At the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 other target legendary creatures. It also has Betrayal. Whenever a legendary creature with counters on it dies, draw a card for each counter on it. You lose 2 life. By the way, it's not a legendary creature with counters on it you control. That's any old legendary creature with counters on it, which I think is cool. By the way, sweet flavor given Caesar and Antony, +1/+1 counters every single turn. And then Caesar dies, draw a card and you lose 2 life. Antony dies, draw a card, lose 2 life. Actually, historically, the flavor on this is kind of on point, but it kind of doesn't get too far beyond cute. But that said, drawing a card whenever a legendary dude with counters dies, that's a pretty specific line of text, but you might get a few cards off of this, so might be better than I think. Now, Leonardo da Vinci, I wonder how he would feel about being on a Magic card. He might be stoked. But anyway, it's 3 mana, 2 and a blue for a 3/3 legendary human artificer. You can pay 3 and 2 blue. Until end of turn, Thopters you control have base power and toughness XX. Of course it does Thopter stuff, where X is the number of cards in your hand. You can also pay 2 a blue and tap Leonardo da Vinci. To draw a card and then discard a card. If the discarded card was an artifact card, exile it from your yard. If you do, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 0/2 Thopter artifact creature with flying, in addition to its other types, brother. So, what a silly card. What is, what a what a silly card. I just love that somebody at Wizards was like, yeah, let me make that Leonardo card. He's gonna do Thopter stuff. It's like, of course he does. But I really don't have that much to say about this other than to marvel at the abject silliness of the existence of this card. And it also makes me wonder that maybe 600-700 years from now, right? Maybe history will progress such that there will be a card game in the future, and I will somehow be any of us. It could be any of us could be in that card game, right? Because this is a guy that Cleopatra was a lady, you know, and they lived in the world. And so anybody, right? Like there could be a super popular card game like 600 years from now, and you just show up in the card game. We see there's proof of that right here. And it's honestly kind of giving me like an existential crisis. So let's move on before my brain starts bleeding and look at a reprint. That's right. There's a couple of reprints in the set, but there's really just one that I want to cover for the purposes of this, because I think it's really sweet they reprinted this card. It's a Cover of Darkness. Now, in case you've never seen this, it's somewhat likely because this card is from Onslaught, which came out, I don't know, almost 2 decades ago at this point, something like that. Or maybe even more. It's right around 2 decades. The card's very old. It's also $50. This card is $50 to buy right now because it's only ever been printed in Onslaught. Ever. And it's really good. Have you read it? Have you had time to read it? It's 2 mana, 1 and a black for an enchantment. And when it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type. Creatures of the chosen type have fear. That means they can only be blocked by black creatures, and I believe artifact creatures as well. So what a good Magic card. You know what I mean? There's a reason that it's $50. It's not $50 good. It's probably like $5 good. But they've only ever printed it once. Before half of you watching the video were alive, I bet. So, you know, good that this one's getting a reprint. But don't look now, everybody. We have made it to the burrow. This is actually like, I was going to say low key, but intensely, extremely high key. This is the set that I'm most excited about like this entire year. I cannot wait for Tiny Animals. And worth noting, I want to go ahead and get this out of the way before I start the Bloomburrow stuff. We're going to get a rotation. When Bloomburrow comes in, we finally get a rotation. So both Innistrad sets, New Capenna, and Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, all gone out of standard. All of those ridiculously good cards gone out of standard. And then Bloomburrow comes in with its chill vibes and a nice cup of tea for you. And honestly, that is kind of what the set is giving me so far. So some of these cards don't look extremely powerful, but A, they're not going to show us the most powerful cards in a sneak peek. First of all, the set's still like 6 months or more from coming out. So there's also that. And also, standard may power down a good bit after rotation, so these cards might be better than they currently appear. So I think we've set the stage enough here. Let's take a look at Bria Riptide Rogue. This is 4 mana, 2, a red, and a blue for a 3/3 legendary Otter Rogue with prowess. And other creatures you control also have prowess. Look at that. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. What a stupid line of text. What a series of stupid lines of text, man. I do think this guy costs a little bit too much. At 4 mana, you got to be super OP in standard. But again, that's where it comes. We're getting a rotation, and who knows how that's going to affect the overall power level of standard, you know? So do keep that in mind. These cards might be better than they look, and that's the last time I say it, I'll promise. But, you know, dude that gives all your other guys prowess is already kind of neat, but whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you cast like 2-3 spells, your guys are getting bigger because they all have prowess and they're unblockable. Like, come on, man. If you untap with this card on the table, you probably win the game, but therein lies the problem, right? Either way, it's an otter. Super cool. There ought to be a lot of those in this set. There's also going to be rabbits in this set, as evidenced by Burke, Long Ear of the Law. I like it. It's 6 mana, 4, a green, and a white for a 4/4 legendary rabbit soldier with vigilance. And when it enters... Note that. When it enters, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. Whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it attacks, double the number of +1/+1 counters on it. Gross. That's pretty good. It's 6 mana for 6 total power, right? You can, I guess, put both counters on it. So it can be a 6 mana, 6/6 vigilance. But also... doubles. First of all, it's completely self-sufficient, right? Like you can put the counters on itself and then double the number of counters on itself every time it attacks. So you don't even have to have other dudes, but it can really affect the board state the turn it comes out, no matter what you put the counters on. You know, if you've already got counters on a couple of creatures, then you proceed to put counters on more stuff with this guy, then suddenly you get in and all your dudes get enormous, like quickly, you know. It doesn't double their PT, but doubling the number of counters on them is kind of a bit of a big deal, I would assume. 6 mana is probably just way too much for this package, and I'm freaking out too much because it's 6 mana. That's a lot. But at the same time, if the dude can come down and actually do something to the game state the turn he comes down, hopefully win you the game, that would be the best thing you could do, then I actually think there might be some like fun playability on him, if nothing else. Fun playability is playability in my mind. Let's take a look at Lumra, Bellow of the Woods. This is another 6 mana green creature. This time it's 4 and 2 green for a star legendary elemental bear with vigilance and reach. It also has power and toughness equal to the number of lands you control. When it enters, mill 4 cards. Then return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. Tap, son. That's a pretty nice little line of text. You get a little splendid reclamation, well, and a mill too, when it enters. Again, that phraseology there. Keep in mind that when Bloomburrow comes out, apparently we're going to drop enters the battlefield and just go to enters, which is like vaguely dirty sounding, but like still, I do like it. It'll allow for Magic cards to not be so wordy, but if I wanted to be cynical about it, I would say it'll allow them to actually become even wordier without appearing as wordy. Like, oh, now we don't have to put the battlefield on there. We can put 2 more just as long words to complicate the card even more, but I will say I do kind of like this change. We all usually either say ETBs or enters. A lot of us say enters anyway, so you might as well change it to that, Either way, I use that as a jumping off point to talk about that because I'm not that impressed by this card that much. A 6 mana, like 6/6 vigilance reach, like, okay, it just dies. I know it's a lame argument, but it does in fact die to Doomblade. It does in fact die to control. It does in fact die to counterspell. All of that stuff is just kind of true, so I apologize for it being true, but it just is. I will say, though, the ETB trigger on this is pretty ridiculous, but if you've already got 6 mana, we need all this mana for? I guess maybe there are worlds where you do, but still, I'm just not that impressed by the pretty high price tag on this. So let's look at a good card. Can we get any good cards from Bloomburrow, Dev? Yeah, I think I got at least one. Let's look at Mabel, Heir to Cragflame. Mabel, not from Redwall. This is 3 mana, 1 in Boros colors, red and white, for a 3/3 legendary mouse soldier. Other mice you control get +1/+1. When Mabel, Heir to Cragflame enters, create Cragflame, a legendary colorless equipment artifact creature, or artifact token rather, with equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has vigilance, trample, and haste, and it has equipped 2. So for 3 mana, you get a 3/3 with an Anthem effect, which is actually not that special. Let me just that on its own is not special, but the fact that it just also throws an equipment on the table that grants 3 keyword abilities, all great keyword abilities too. Yeah, this is all right. I've seen some people compare this to like 4 Mirrodin lately, like just today, and I think it's actually way better than just any 4 Mirrodin thing that we saw. Although I understand the comparison 100%, but still, a lot like those for Mirrodin things, if they do kill the creature, you still have the equipment. And in this case, the equipment is relatively cheap to equip and again grants 3 extremely desirable keyword abilities and, a power toughness boost for what it's worth. It ain't much, but it's something. Just the fact that it grants haste and trample is actually just a big deal in and of itself, and it lines up kind of interestingly against control. They have to deal with the creature, but you got 2 cards out of this. They got to deal with the creature and the equipment. They can't deal with the equipment. Now, for the rest of the game, even after a Sunfall, you have the ability to rip a creature off the top of your library, haste, and trample over with a power boost for a pretty minimal mana investment. I think that's actually really sweet. So there's the cool things that line up about this card that I like. So I don't know. Sweet card. I know that all mice you control get +1/+1 is not the, what are you going to build a mouse deck? I will. Raging Battle Mouse and Cheeky House Mouse. Like, it's actually not like the worst looking deck in the world at this point. So I don't know, dog. And honestly, this plays kind of well with Raging, with Battle Mouse, because 2 permanents come into play, right? So you get the celebration trigger. It's just meant to go together. I like when Wizards put seeds down and then those seeds grow. It's just all the things about this card I kind of like. Let's throw that out there. Definitely, I would say the equipment is way more dangerous than the mouse, but they do have to deal with both of them. But, oh, ladies and gentlemen, I think we made it. I'm pretty sure that's actually it. Close to 30 previews on the day and a bunch of stuff to get hype about. I mean, we'll have all forgotten about these Bloomburrow cards by the time Bloomburrow comes out. And you probably shouldn't start making your mice deck just yet, because again, it's going to be like 6 or 7 months, Give it some time, but still, the Outlaws at Thunder Junction cards looked really, really sweet. It's nice to see, Tiny Bones looking good. And the fact that we're getting these, breaking news cards like Thoughtseize, like there's a lot to get excited about. That new sword looks awesome too. Modern Horizons 3 has some freaking bangers in it. I can't wait to get Psychic Frog. Can't wait to get a Johnny. It's probably going to cost me like $25, but anybody want to trade me in a Johnny when it comes out? I'd be down for that. But anyway, that is all the spoilers for today. Just let me know what your favorite cards were from this whole batch. Aside from that, like the video. You know what to do. It's a YouTube stuff. Just like the video. Even if you're not the kind of person that likes videos, just hit that thumbs up. It's super easy. Helps the creators that you like more than you can possibly imagine. If you just take that tiny little action and just click all it takes. I know it's lame and you feel stupid doing it. Just one time, you hit the thumbs up. It'll put me in more recommended feeds, and that'll help the channel out greatly. This goes for any of your favorite creators. Help them. Either way, we're dying out here, but not all of us, but some of us. But either way, if you really want to help out, you can check out the Patreon. Link in the description down there. $1 a month is all I truly ask from you, and that'll let you vote on what we're doing. I got another poll coming out very, very soon before the end of the month. So help pick our next deck or video or whatever we end up doing. Just $1 a month and support the channel. Kind of a lot. But in any case, I'm done now. What is this video, like an hour long? I don't think we didn't get that long, right? It's like 40 minutes or something. Just thanks for hanging out for me that long. For me? Thanks for hanging out with me that long, guys. And I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.